Hey YouTube, this is Tabletop Magic, and today we're going to talk about a modern deck generally known as Goryo's Breach or Instant Reanimator. It's a really fun deck, and if you like unfair decks, this is kind of the deck for you. It does what it does, and it does it pretty well. It is a possibly turn 2 kill, which is kind of frowned upon, but it does it. Let's go ahead and we'll go into the reanimation targets. We have Grizzlebrand, who is probably one of the best reanimation targets ever printed, just for the drawing 7 cards, and he's still a 7/7 with flying and lifelink. Pretty good. Emrakul is the next, also known as the giant flying spaghetti monster by some. He's a big boy. He's a 15/15. He actually can be reanimated. Most reanimators people are familiar with are from Legacy, and generally Emrakul does not make that cut because his last effect, when he's put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library. Well, that's not an issue for us when we start casting Goryo's Vengeance. We also have Through the Breach. We'll get into that. Next up we have Simian Spirit Guide. Simian Spirit Guide is really great for us because we want that 1 extra mana just to help us go off turn 2. He's also a red spell, which is very relevant later on. We'll get into that. Up next is one of the biggest cards that makes the deck tick, is Goryo's Vengeance. It's really good. It's the only way that we can get Emrakul into play, because when he is actually discarded, his ability will go on the stack. It's not a replacement effect. So Emrakul's effect will go on the stack, and then you will activate Goryo's Vengeance. You'll bring Emrakul, put him into play, and then your graveyard will be shuffled into your library after he's already come into play, which is the big part there. But he is a legendary. That's the one downside of this, is your reanimation targets have to be legendary, but it's still pretty good, and it is also relevant. You could splice it into Arcane if you have the mana late game or whatnot. Up next is Through the Breach. Through the Breach is simply awesome if you can get that 5 mana out there, which some cards like Simian Spirit Guide and Pindad Prism, we'll get into that one a little bit, really help you get to that 5 mana early. And you can go ahead and drop Emrakul or Grizzlebrand and start attacking with him that turn. Emrakul, his biggest perk is his Annihilator for 6. Generally wipes out all permanents on your opponent's side of the field. Generally. It doesn't always happen that way, but sometimes it does. And then you have Grizzlebrand, who can swing for 7 with lifelink, gain you 7, and then you pay the 7 life, which will bring us to our next card. After you pay the 7 life and draw 7 cards, we have Fury the Horde. Fury the Horde is very special to this deck, and one of the big things about it is, well, you get an extra attack step for removing 2 red cards from your hand, remove them from play, or from the game, sorry, and you can cast it without paying its mana cost. Well, say you reanimate a Grizzlebrand. Grizzlebrand has haste. He will attack for 7, gain the 7 life. You can pay 7 life to draw 7 cards, hopefully drawing into a Fury the Horde, and then you would discard or remove 2 red cards from your hand. Being there are quite a few red cards in this deck, you can repeat your combat phase, swinging again, gaining your 7, paying the 7, trying to draw into another Fury the Horde. That's where Emrakul's second effect, or his last effect, comes into play, where it shuffles your graveyard. If you did have to discard quite a few red spells at the beginning of the game, it really helps you to get those spells back into your deck so you can try to draw into them later. Really great. Up next is It Charm, and I really like Is It Charm because it adds a lot of different directions to the deck, just for the fact that it is a counterspell, which is really great. Or kind of a counterspell. They could still pay the 2 mana, or it can take care of a small creature that's, you know, possibly causing you a little grief. You know, maybe a Deathrite Shaman. You can take care of that early. That way they can't try to stack Deathrite Shaman's effect behind Goryo's Vengeance, and which can be, yeah. But he also has a Faithless Looting effect built into it, which is really great because, you know, it's a discard outlet. Up next is Faithless Looting, like we kind of mentioned with Is It Charm. Faithless Looting is awesome just for the fact that you can draw into 2 cards and then possibly discard a Griselbrand or Emrakul, so you can start your Goryo's Vengeance to reanimate it. Up next is Peer Through the Depths. Peer Through the Depths is really awesome just for the fact that it digs deep. It digs 5 cards in there. It is an instant, and it helps you try to dig to say a Goryo's Vengeance. You dig deep for a Through the Breach if you need it, and then, you know, say the end of your opponent's turn, and then you could next turn drop the Through the Breach and attack with a in-hand Emrakul or Griselbrand. You know, try to get that going. Up next is Lightning Axe. Lightning Axe is only in here as a 3 of because there are quite a few decks, especially when you run against control, that won't have any creatures in play, and you have to be able to target a creature. So if you don't have a creature, you can't actually play it. Up next is Pindad Prism, which is really great. It's a older card. Some people may not know this one, but it has Sunburst, and when it comes into play, you know, for the 2 colors that you would pay, this is a 3-color deck, but the 2 colors would give you the 2 charge counters. Well, you remove those. That kind of gives you a big mana boost. Say turn 1, you play a land, then you would discard or remove your Simian Spirit Guide from the game and drop the Pindad Prism. Pindad Prism will come into play with 2 charge counters. Next turn, you would play your land drop. You could play a Is It Charm or a Faithless Looting, Lightning Axe, any of those, to discard one of these, one of those big guys. Emrakul is not so great turn 2, but it still does swing for 15, which is pretty good, and will probably take care of their 1 or 2 lands they have out there, maybe the creature. That's okay. Griselbrand would be probably the better option turn 2, but either one could work, and you would, you know, find a way to discard off the one of your lands, and then you could bring your you know, way to discard through one of these off one of your lands, and then you bring your Goryo's Vengeance out and you reanimate it, and boom. So you have 4 mana available turn 2. If you have another Simian Spirit Guide in hand, possibly 5 mana to go Through the Breach turn 2, which is kind of stretching it, but it can be done, and it has been done by me quite a few times. Not always the best play, but really, really great deck. This is the main board. We're going to go ahead and clean this up, and we're going to look into the mana base. It does have a 20 land mana base. Hey YouTube, and we're back with the mana base for Goryo's Breach, which is pretty simple. We're going to go through it, and I'll kind of explain why I'm where I'm at. Up first, we have 2 Blood Crypts. Blood Crypts just being the go-to source for black and red. I have some Steam Vents right behind that. You know, just basically the same reason I have the Blood Crypts in there, and Watery Grave. Up next after that. And those are basically your shock lands. Those give you options when you are fetching with your Scalding Tarn, where you can pretty much get whatever color or color combination you would need for what your hand is like, if you do have a Scalding Tarn in your opening. Up next we have Sulfur Falls. Sulfur Falls is awesome because it does come into play untapped off any of these. Not so much the swamp and any of these basics here. So there's a really good chance that, you know, when you drop that turn 2 or whatnot, it'll just come into play regular. Up next, up next we have the 3 Scalding Tarns I'm running main. Well, there's none in the sideboard or anything either, but the only 3 I'm running. Up next is 2 Black Cleave Cliffs, excuse me. And those are in there just for that turn 1 or turn 2, red or black, which is pretty nice. Gemstone Mine, just to smooth out the mana a little bit if you need any other color, because it is a 3-color deck. And in the middle between all of these, my basics and non-basic lands, I have Bosju, who shelters all. And if I mispronounce that, I'm sorry. Bosju is really, really awesome. It does come to play tapped, which is its downside, but you can pay 2 life and add 1 mana to your mana pool and spend that on an instant or sorcery spell. That spell cannot be countered by spells or abilities, which is really awesome when you want to try to resolve, let's say a, Goryo's Vengeance or a Through the Breach. It's pretty nice just to be able to shut down control like that, just to start to go in your combo. It's a 1 of in the main. I do keep 1 in the side for those matches where they're going to bring in quite a bit of counter spells that they have boarded or whatnot, and they still have some main board. And then up next are my basic lands. I generally use white bordered revised lands because they look really ugly and kind of makes people scratch their heads. I've talked about it before. But anytime I splash blue in any deck, I always go for my foil Mirrodin lands, just for the fact that this island is my favorite land of all time. So I always have to go with the full set of foil Mirrodin lands. So I have 2 islands, 2 foil Mirrodin mountains, and 1 foil Mirrodin swamp. All of my favorites, and it's all because the artifact land that matches them is in the background of each one of these lands. So, Vault of Whispers, Seed of Snoid, and the Great Furnace is in the back of the mountain. It's in the background, really interesting. I don't know if you may not have seen it, but my favorite lands. This is pretty much the land base, and there's a reason for it. I do have 15 possible red sources in the deck. That's if I'm counting my Simian Spirit Guides also. It's 15 mana sources, not counting Pindad Prisms. But I have 15 spells that require red mana that I will actually cast. So I'm not counting Fury the Horde because it's not a spell I would actually cast for its mana cost, but around the rest of it. And I have 15 red sources kind of to go with that if you count the Simian Spirit Guides and not the Pindad Prisms. I do have 6 blue spells that in the main board that I will cast, but to match up to that I have 9 blue sources, and a lot of that is because of the sideboard. You have to make sure your mana base will still support whatever you have to sideboard in, and there is quite a bit of blue in the sideboard. Things like Echoing Truth. I only have 4 black spells in the main board, and those are obviously the Goryo's Vengeance, but I have 8 black sources. That also matches with the anti-control package I keep in the sideboard, which is really nice, and it helps for some of the other other times you'll come into that. Out of all those numbers I read off, I'm not counting things like Grizzlebrand, because I'll never. I guess you could cast a Grizzlebrand or hard cast a Grizzlebrand, but you'll never actually need that. But it does give me a pretty diverse mana base to help with Pindad Prisms, which are a big part of this deck. Really, really fun. Play Pindad Prisms in one other deck, which is interesting. But this is pretty much my my mana base, 20 lands, and I think 20 lands is where this deck needs to be, because you really only need 2-3 lands to go off. You can go into later turns, which happens. It happens quite often, especially against some control, which is, if they're playing their cards right. But this is the mana base, and I'm going to try to get into the sideboard a little bit. I don't like to throw down definite sideboards because sideboards always change depending on what meta you're in. So if you're going into a blind meta, you may want to prepare for certain things a little more than others, and if you know you're going to go into a control meta, you might want to prepare your sideboard for that. So I'll give a general sideboard.
Hey YouTube, this is Tabletop Magic,
and we're back. We're going to talk about this sideboard and wrap it up. First off, we're going to go through is Rakdos Charm. Rakdos Charm is really, really great option for this deck because all three effects are very relevant, and they also save us space in our sideboard by giving us three very relevant effects in one card. First up is the exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Really, really awesome, just for the fact that it gives you your grave hate, plus it can destroy target artifact, gives us a little help against affinity, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller, which can also be relevant against affinity, or say some combo decks like Splinter Twin, or even like some of the pod decks when they start getting quite a few creatures out there. Up next is Ricochet Trap. And the really cool thing about this is it is a counterspell, basically, almost, except for it's in the color red, which is awesome. Both cards, they give us a little something. Rakdos Charm and this Trap give us a little something red that we can board in, and we'll still be able to discard or remove from the game to Fury of the Horde. Gives us a little extra there. But you can change the target. If they played a blue spell, you can change the target to that, or to itself, or to something else. But say they play like a remand, you could change Remand's target to target Trap, and Trap will actually bounce back to your hand, which is really funny. But when you try to go off and whatnot, activating your Goryo's Vengeance or Through the Breach, it's really awesome. Up next, we're starting to get into a little more of our control package. It's where these are coming into is Duress. Duress gives us a little something against some control and combo to just get out there, and you'll have what you need. Helps us get around some of our grave hate that may come in. You really don't want to see cards like Grafdigger's Cage. Maybe play this first turn. If they mull, especially if they mull really aggressively, they're trying to get generally into their graveyard hate. So Duress can really help you there, to try to get around certain things. Well, if they're on the play, Grafdigger's Cage obviously would come out before you could Duress, but anyways, Dismember is in there because there are some troublesome creatures that you really want to not be on the field. So Dismember gives us a very cheap, effective removal spell that we can play on certain things, maybe a Scavenging Ooze or Deathrite Shaman, just to name a couple. There are a few other creatures out there you really don't want to stick around. It gives us a 1 mana option. I could change these out for possibly like a Lightning Bolt or something, which would give us another red creature in an early game removal spell. Probably one of the best red spells, probably the best red spell ever printed. Up next we have Echoing Truth. Mentioned that earlier, but Echoing Truth is really awesome against a lot of combo decks. It also gives us anti-hate. So say they play their Rest in Peace or something like that, you could, at the end of the turn, Echoing Truth, bounce it back to their hand. Or if they're playing a combo deck, it gives you a little something, if it's like a Splinter Twin, like I said before, I see quite a bit of Splinter Twin. It gives us kind of a little control on the board to bounce troublesome permanents. Up next is our last piece, which is the Boss Jew, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry, who shelters all. And really awesome just to maybe side it in against a little bit of control. I do have quite a bit in here against control. You know, these 7 to name some, possibly Echoing Truth. If they're a white variant of control, there's a good chance there could be a Rest in Peace in their sideboard. But this gives you some anti-control, this gives you a little anti-combo, you know, anti-creature, a little anti-aggro kind of. But this is a general sideboard. There are some other really good options out there. In place of maybe your Ricochet Trap, you could do Spell Snares, would be an option, or another really great one that is a good option. You could, it's a newer card, Swan Song or Song of the Swan. I have them around here somewhere, but really great card. Counters basically anything that you would not want to see hit the field in this deck. So it's a good option. There's some others out there. You know, just play around, look at some other people's lists. I could have these as Thought Seizes, but I just went with Duress because Duress really does what I need. I don't lose that 2 mana or that 2 life, excuse me. And I guess I could Thought Seize myself, but I have enough discard outlets where paying the 2 life kind of less appealing, especially against some decks. And I'm already paying the 2 life off of Boss Jews and possibly Dismembers. But this is the sideboard. This is a general idea. You could also run Demure Charm. Sorry, that's another one. It is a discard outlet, a removal spell, and a counter spell all in one. So that's not too bad. But this is the deck. And if you guys have any comments for me, let me know. If you guys like the deck tech, go ahead and like, subscribe, comment. Anything's appreciated. If you guys don't like something I did, let me know, and I can try to address that. If you don't like the build, I can't help you there. Sorry. But it was really great. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and you guys have a good one.